Hello, and welcome to the Better Dental Life podcast, where we speak with extraordinary individuals who inspire us by showing us new possibilities and shattering our limiting beliefs. On this podcast, we don't just talk about better smiles, we talk about better lives. I'm your host, Mark Davis. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Better Dental Life podcast. I'm Mark Davis, your host, and I'm so excited to have with me today Dr. Kristine Aadland. She's been a longtime friend. We've met in the CEREC world and spent a lot of time together, so it's fun to talk with her. She is a dentist in Vancouver, Washington, grew up in Vancouver, and owns a very successful practice there. And she spends a lot of time teaching and mentoring others and had a huge contribution to women in dentistry. So excited to have her on the program. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so good to see you.
Right, because it has been a little bit.
It has been. Yeah.
So I know, and I think a lot of people know this about you, but not everybody that's listening knows that your parents have worked in construction or had construction business, and you are like a heavy machinery operator. Do you still do that? Do you still play on the big toys?
You know, every once in a while, I'm allowed to hop on. Whether my parents sold their company, but he still does some consulting. So every once in a while, we can go to the big trade shows, and there's nothing more fun than being all dressed up and then hopping on equipment. And they had to do everything. They're like, "Oh, okay."
That's right. You're like, I know how to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun to play around and do some of the games that they do. And then we just bought a good piece of property that we're redoing. So have some time to play on some farm equipment that we can talk
nice.
about.
Yeah. You know, the biggest piece of equipment that I operate is, because we have some property, we have 10 acres where I'm at, and we have a tractor, but it's more like a toy tractor. It's not a real tractor.
What defines a real tractor?
Yeah, I think it's got to maybe be a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Yeah, mine can't move very much. It gets petered out pretty quick when you start to carry a load and it wants to tip over, but it's still fun. Yeah.
It is. It's nice to be outside, and it's productive, like you're moving dirt or building something. So it's fun.
So that's how you grew up. How did you get interested in dentistry?
Yeah. So dentistry was very random in my family. I always thought I would go into construction. I was running heavy equipment. I was on sites. Typically I was the only woman, but I didn't know any different. So that wasn't something that bothered me. But I think it actually bothered my dad a little bit as I was getting older.
Oh, yeah.
So I was out in the middle of nowhere on a project, and my dad came up and he's like, "You know what? I don't like, is this what you want to do the rest of your life? Like, you could do these projects and you could make, like $60,000 a year and be stuck in a job shack out in the middle of nowhere, or you could be surrounded by people, which is who you love. Why don't you start exploring options?" But I grew up with engineers, and so that is what I knew. And I wrote a checklist, like every good engineer does, of all the things that I wanted to do. And I wanted to own a business. I grew up in a family business. Now I realize how lucky I am that my parents were so transparent in that family business. So I learned a lot from that unknowingly. And I wanted to be a part of the community. My parents were really active in their organization called Associated General Contractors. So I grew up going to these big meetings, and people were never competitors. It was all like, how do we do best business practices? And how do we also help the communities that we're in? And so I wanted to be part of that as well. And I wanted to be around people and give back. And at the time I was living with a hygienist, and she saw my list and she's like, "Go be a dentist." And I was like, "Absolutely not. That would be the worst thing on the planet." Because I'm terrified of the dentist. I'm terrified of doctors. I'm like the worst patient on the planet. And
were you the traumatized child that we see in our offices?
Yes, like the old military docs that everything burned and smelled bad and it hurt and they just said, "Suck it up." Like I was definitely that patient. So she said, "Just come hang out at my office and see what we're about." And I walked into her office and everyone was happy and laughing and it smelled good. And I started talking to these doctors, and they took Fridays off and they got to ski every Friday. So they were either on the mountain in the winter,
not bad, right?
or on the water in the summer. And I was like, "I want to work 4 days, sign me up." Had no idea what a dentist did. Not a clue. I just knew I wanted that lifestyle. because they talked about being part of the community and they own their own businesses, and who doesn't want to ski every Friday? So I applied to dental school.
I love that you thought you'd have a lot more time off as a dentist because you work way too hard. I know you don't take that kind of time off. But that was why you picked dentistry.
Yeah, yeah. And it's work hard, play hard. And if you love what you do, I can truly say it's not work. I mean, I
Yeah,
can't imagine just sitting around with time off. I mean, I do love to get to the mountain when I can, but I love what I do.
that's awesome. I love it too. That's really cool. I love that. Now, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with growing up in that construction world, which I think many of us think of as a man's world, and being the woman on the job site, because you do so much for women in dentistry. Why is that? Is that part of it? Is that where that came from?
It's funny. I wouldn't have thought so. And like, I've never thought of myself as this big feminist or anything like that. I've always actually been really terrified by women because I've grown up on construction sites with not a lot of women, and the women that were
Me
around.
too. You and me both.
Yeah, they're kind of scary. So, when I got into dentistry, so obviously I met you through CDocs and all the CEREC world. And I went to the training and I was always really enamored by the training. And then I started posting some stuff online. Again, like I was so new into everything. I just didn't know better. I mean, if I look back on my original posts, I'm like horrified what I posted, but it's how we learn, right? That's the depths of life. And I remember getting a call from Shayna and she's like, "Hey, is there any way you would come be a mentor?" And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I don't have anything to mentor. I gave her every excuse in the world. And she's like, "We cannot get women. Like, everyone's saying the exact same thing. Everyone's busy. I was like, "We really need women." So I'm like, okay, like total sob story. I do have a problem saying no. So I said yes. And I showed up and we had 300 mentors there. We're at the Spear Center in that big auditorium. And there were 6 women. And at first I was like, I mean, I'm competitive. Like there's no competitive, right? And I was like, I am one of 6 women. And then again, I wouldn't talk to any of the women there because women are scary. Like I didn't want to be part of that. Like, I'm one of the guys hanging out with all the guys. And as I kind of sat there and reflected, and I'm a CE junkie, and you start to go to the podiums, I'm like, why aren't there more women? And I had a conversation with Sam and said, and I was kind of being a squeaky wheel, like, why don't you have more women up there? And he said the same thing, like, well, why don't you do it? I said, well, I can't do it. Like,
other women. I'm not talking about me, other women.
Not me. And he said, well, I mean, if you're not willing, why should anybody else? And again, it's just one of those things that really struck home. And so we did some speaking classes and a lot of coaching. And I can't say that I get up there and love it every time. Like I still get nervous when I get up there. I show my work and I show my business. I'm really transparent because that's something that drives me nuts is when I go to CE and someone's like, "Oh, look at me. I'm so great. Do it my way." And there's no way. I'm like, look at me. I've made every mistake possible. Please learn from my mistakes. And what you realize is not every situation is the same for your practice. And so if you can learn from that different practice style and something hits, or you get that validation of, oh yeah, I do that too. That's what feels good. So I've been on this journey. I try to pump up other women to get up there too, and just say, hey, I was where you were. It's not that I love it. It's just kind of guiding that path for other people. And now, I mean, it gets easier and easier. You realize you're still breathing at the other side when you get through that hour and a half lecture, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
I can do this.
So tell me about, I know that you haven't, because of COVID, you haven't had your meetings with Impact for Women in Dentistry, but tell me a little bit about that. How did that start? What was that? And then I know you're going to get it rolling again, kick it off again.
Yeah. So part of meeting women on the road. So one of the reasons I got asked also to mentor is we were on the road teaching CEREC, and like we went to Houston and there were 17 women doctors and they're like, "We need you there." And again, I was teasing. I'm like, I'm the last person you want there. But as I went, and that was one of my big fears, is like being in this group of women, I realized, A, they were really cool. And everyone had really similar stories, just different versions of it. And as I gathered this network of really awesome women, I thought, I want everyone to meet each other and introduce each other. And why not have a platform that feels a little bit safer and we can help each other in every aspect of life? And so I put this meeting together where it is definitely clinically focused, business focused, life focused, financially focused. And I tried to have speakers who both had a name and a presence, but also some new speakers as well for some up and coming, and just fell in love with the
Fun.
meeting. And I had really, really good dental industry partners who supported that and continue to support that. And so I was really sad when COVID arrived, as everybody was, because it shut us down. And I mean, you're in Oregon as well. So if you're in Oregon, Portland's still a little under fire.
Portland's a little sad. And we just heard that REI is pulling out of Portland
Uh,
because they can't handle it anymore. And a
all the
few other stores.
break-in.
It's kind of sad, Portland downtown right now.
It is. It's so sad. And that's where our meeting is right downtown Portland. And so I am going to kick it back off. I trained down in Tempe, Arizona with an organization, and we're building a new facility down there. And I'm so excited. I'm waiting on construction because I know it's weird, but sometimes construction's not always on time, especially
That's
today.
not contractors' fault, right?
I know, all the contractors' faults. So we're waiting for that hard date of when we're going to move in, which hopefully is in the next couple of months, and then I'll set that date. And Arizona, obviously, it's always nice to get down to and to see some sunshine if you're in a state that doesn't always have sunshine, and get this rolling again. And I would tell you that it's not, we call it women, or we call it impact for women in dentistry, but we have a lot of men also come to the program because women tend to still run dentistry, right? Like, whether it's assistants, team members, front office, back office, like all of it. And so it's a lot of communication, and a lot of communication about how women treat other women. So it's fun.
I love that. That's really neat. That's amazing. So are there, what I thought of when you mentioned that meeting, I went to life coach school, and I've been to a couple of life coach big meetings where, you have hundreds of people. And last month went to a meeting in Miami, and life coaches are mostly women. So I'm like, in that environment, I'm one of 5 guys in these sea of hundreds of women, which just felt like work every day for me. But
yeah, right.
I was definitely, the roles were flipped. And so it was kind of, like you as a mentor, I'm looking around going, one of 5 guys. It kind of felt like that a little bit. It was pretty wild.
Yeah.
So you, what do you see as challenges? Are there unique challenges for women in dentistry?
I do. I think there are. I was down in Texas working with Kane Waters this past weekend with my 2 associates. I have 2 incredible women who I work with, and we were in the room. And I think one of the things that is interesting on the business side is it's different when you are the owner working with a lot of women in the practice, because there's barriers that are often crossed, versus a lot of times as a male business owner, and this is so stereotypical, there's an office manager that can sometimes be that barrier or buffer. And the things that your chairside assistant might tell you versus what they're going to tell me are different. And like it or not, it's, if you're not a friend, then you're often called a brat.
Oh, you're so politically correct. Like this is a PG show, right?
Yeah, PG show. Or if you're too nice, then you're not sought as a good leader. But if you're, there's a lot of dichotomies in there. And again, it's mostly how women communicate with other women and how they perceive leadership, both coming from a man and a woman. And there's been some really good studies, and that's going through this impact, the women in dentistry stuff, that I love reading these studies that show, like, there's a classic one called the Heidi Howard study. And it's been gone over and over and over. They've redone this study many, many times trying to disprove it. But it started in Columbia at their business school in their MBA program. And they had a resume for a man and a resume for a woman, the exact same resume. The only difference was it was Heidi versus Howard on the resume. They split the group in half, and it was a mixed group of men and women here and a mixed group of men and women over here. So A and B. Both A and B came to the same conclusion, that they would love to work for Howard, but Heidi was too forward and too whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just on gender and leadership. But I mean, there was no leadership style other than just the descriptive words on a piece of paper.
Wow. Oh, and that's incredible. And there's so much truth to that. I mean, men are expected to be stern and strong leaders, and women, that's just seen as a little cranky and mean. And
so we talk about it.
I love that. And that's the best way, is talk about it. And what do? This is the world we're living in right now. 1, we want to change that. But number 2, how do we live in the world right now? And what do we do in that world? So I
Yeah,
think both of those are great. Let's make it better, but also adapt.
absolutely. And
That's really cool.
this is a crazy world right now too with, I mean, there was obviously the COVID scare and childcare was a big issue. And if you have an office full of, at the time I had
Yeah.
25 young women employees, mostly with kids, it was a challenging time.
Yeah. Now you hinted, because in Tempe where the construction is for the new building, that's for pathways, implant pathways. Is that right?
Yes. So
So
Implant
yeah.
Pathway has been around since 2018 and mostly known for teaching implants from both basic to advanced. And I met Dr. Justin Moody, who's the founder of it, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, somewhere in there. And I found out about the program. And what I loved about it is the live education part of it, meaning he has a nonprofit associated with the teaching clinic. And the uniqueness is this nonprofit has full-time staff dentists to take care of these patients comprehensively. And so they're not just coming in for implants and then walking away with cavities and lesions and all this stuff. They're actually being restored and being taken care of, which is huge. And
Yeah, that's
so
great.
he was facing some challenges because the patients then do have to pay for some of those crowns or fillings or whatever if they're not taken care of by the staff dentists. And some of those patients still can't afford it. And so I kept raising my hand, like, let me teach Sarek, let me come in and help, because I know we can also teach other things to these docs and then provide those services to those patients. And so I think that since 2018, the latest number is $60 million of donated dentistry.
Wow, that's
It's
incredible.
amazing. And it's anywhere from implants to crowns to whatever the patients need. And so we try to teach courses according to that.
Now, how often do you go down there for teaching?
I'm down there at least probably twice a month, unless I'm on the
Wow,
road
you're
doing things.
traveling.
But I am on a plane every Wednesday and every Sunday. And then I'm in my practice Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So practicing 3 days a week and then on an airplane.
Now, see, I told you you didn't have those long weekends like you dreamed of as a dentist. I knew
It's
it.
not the long weekends. They're just
That's right. They're just traveling and teaching, which is fun.
yeah.
Now, tell me about your practice, where you're at right now.
So I did a startup practice in 2009, which at that time for any younger docs, it was the first economic downturn since World War II.
Yeah.
So anyone thought of starting a practice in that time was crazy.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was a scary time. I
it was
remember.
it was
Yeah.
a scary time, but I didn't know any better. That's the difference. And if you hear funny sounds back there, I live across the street from my mom and I'm so spoiled that she's making dinner.
Oh, I hope it's amazing.
Just if you hear any weird background.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm in my 40s, but my mom still takes care of me.
that's great.
So I did a startup practice in 2009, but I didn't know any better because I was an associate before, didn't really know a ton about the business side. So I didn't know what was good or bad. I wasn't in the time where you could just hang your shingle and print money. So you had
Yeah.
to work for it, you had to run that business. And one of my competitive advantages for sure is that my last name is Aadland. So I have two last names.
You're going to be at the beginning of all the yellow pages.
Exactly. Because we still had yellow pages then, by the
Right.
way.
That was important then.
It was so important. So not only front of the list for yellow pages, but I was also front of the list for all the insurance companies. And as an associate, I worked both in private practice and at General Dental, which is a corporate dental office here. I wanted to learn the private practice side, but I also really wanted to learn the systems and efficiencies of corporate dentistry because they know how to run a business. And I took all of that, combined it in my private practice, learned how to work efficiently and still make money, even being on the PPOs. And also at that time, Delta Dental in the state of Washington dropped all their fees by 25%. And so a lot of our local dentists
Yeah.
were pulling out of all the PPOs. And so that was my opportunity to grow and to market because it was either me at top of the list in corporate dental offices, or they had to pay a lot more for fee for service. And Vancouver is set up, there's about 175,000 people in our town. We have a lot of industry and all of our major employers are all PP only insurance plans. And so it was a business decision. It's not a decision of like, I believe in fee for service or I believe in PPO. It's
Right.
look at the people who you're surrounded with who are going to pay. And even the wealthiest business owners I know here, if they have a PPO insurance plan, they're going to come to a PPO office most of the time, because some of it's they don't know any better. And that's just kind of what our industry was. And so I did it. And with the technology, I became efficient and profitable and grew. So I started with 3 operatories, grew my practice. We have 10 operatories now. I have 2 full-time associates who are looking at buying in. First time I've ever considered partnership. I dreamed of owning many, many offices at one time because I wanted to bring young docs in and mentor. And so I owned another office, which for anyone looking at owning another office, I'd say my challenge is I lead by example. And so I did not work in that office. And that was a challenge of not being there.
Yeah.
And then I had a lot of young women associates where things came up and they moved to Idaho because of their husband's job or whatever the reason was. Everyone moved.
Yeah, you didn't
Portland
didn't
right
have
now.
the stability you needed. Yeah. Yeah, everyone in Portland moved, right?
Yeah, I lost so many hygienists to Idaho. And so that was a challenge. And then there was so much stress related to that of who's going to cover. Can you still provide that dentistry? Having a high technology office, not everyone can step in and run a CEREC. And you can
Yeah.
say like, okay, well, they might not be able to do a CEREC, but just send it to a lab. Well, when you've coached your patients this entire time that we do same day dentistry and this is high quality work and you get it in one appointment, and then all of a sudden you tell them, oh, except for this reason,
Right.
it's hard. And so,
And I mean, you have always, I've admired you for the work that you do, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Your work is beautiful, and I've seen a lot of your work. You're an incredible dentist. So the fact that you have built this PPO practice doesn't mean it's a churn and burn and crank things through. You're doing incredible work there. Your office is beautiful. It's an amazing environment that you're in. And so I can see the challenge of that separate practice, because you expect what you're able to do and what you're giving to patients. And if you're not seeing that in your partner practice, then I imagine that's a big challenge.
it is. And you always think there's so much time for education or, I had a very different thought in my head of what happened. And there were great
Yeah.
things that happened out of it. I don't regret it by any means, but my personal life also pivoted because at first I was going to stay home and I was going to do this and grow all these businesses and spend all my time mentoring. And then instead my life shifted a little bit and
And you're
I'm
flying on Wednesday and Sunday.
yeah, and I fly every Wednesday and Sunday. And so that's hard when you're not specifically there. And I tend to be a hands-on leader. So yeah.
You're hands-on, you're very organized. I remember it's been a number of years. I don't know if you remember, but we were talking one time and you talked about your office systems and how you'd written them all out so much. And I'm like, oh, will you send those to me? And so I've used those for years.
Good. Have
And
you updated them?
adapted and changed a little bit,
Good.
but you're extremely organized. I think that was pretty incredible.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
love
So when you have this other practice, because I'm really curious about what's going on, the thoughts you're having, you've started this, you want to make sure it works. The moment you realize, okay, this isn't working for me, what's going through your head?
it's terrifying to feel like a failure. So I really had this big vision that this is going to work and I'm going to buy these practices and bring these young docs in. And so when the first one didn't happen, okay, there's a reason why. And then the second one didn't happen. Okay, there's a reason why. And the third one didn't happen. And all of a sudden I can't find a doctor. I can't find employees. I mean, employees was hard enough, but that practice I owe money on and it's draining from my other practice. And do I bring those doctors over? But then it really affects my other practice. And then we had the culture of my first practice was starting to go down because now they're feeling the stress of the second practice. There was so much weight there that I really had to think, like, is this just ego that wants to keep this going? Or
Right.
is it time to like actually look at the business and say, hey, maybe this is a great opportunity for other people? And so on paper, this is a great practice. And it really was not even just on paper, it was a great practice, but it needed someone with ownership who was going to stay there for the long haul, not just an associate. And so I found an incredible doctor who bought it. and he's really excited. He's the first man to own the practice ever in 45 years. So I think that was a little bit intimidating for everybody because they just didn't know what that was going to be like. But he was excited about mentorship, and mentorship just looks a little bit different from the ownership side at this point. So he had crash courses in implants and in CEREC, and he's come in and I know it's always easy to look from the outside and think, oh, business is so easy and I'm going to do
Right.
this. And he's definitely learning some of those lessons. He would be the first to tell you, but he's doing it great and gracefully. And it's fun to see some of those things that come up, because you forget, if you've owned a practice for a long time, that, oh yeah, that did happen with those barriers. That were there.
Do remember that.
Yeah. I just had to kind of get out of my own way and realize, like, okay, I want to go down this other path now and spend my time focused here. And I can't be everywhere all at once or have something draining on me that was a weight every day. So it was just time to pivot.
That's awesome. And, it's when we do pivot, which is exactly what it is. We get in our head, we think of failure. Like you said, I hate the idea of failing. I hate the thought of, oh, I failed at this. And when life changes, when plans change, and when you realize, okay, this isn't working like I wanted it to, then it ultimately is an opportunity for growth. You've learned so much from that. You get so much from that, and you're mentoring and teaching for other people. You have that experience now to grab onto, which is incredible. So I love that. I love that you pivot gracefully.
I don't know if everyone would say it was very graceful, but
That's right. Right. And it probably felt like a huge relief afterwards.
It did. It did, because then I could go back and focus on my practice, who needed attention, because they were lacking the attention when I was focused here, and they were used to having all of my attention and just kind of wondering what's going to go on and what's going to happen. And it's been a really great result.
Well, I love the idea of expanding our income as dentists. And I think there's a number of ways to do it, a number of ways that you've been doing that. And what I mean by expanding our income is we can make really great money when our fingers are in a patient's mouth. And sometimes the money's great, and we forget that we have to run a business too, because we just focus on our fingers in a patient's mouth. But there's so much we can do when we're not doing that dentistry. We're not doing clinical dentistry to make some money. And one is to have associates and grow your practice that way, and others to have another practice. And I think a lot of people don't realize how challenging that is, and maybe not as lucrative as we imagine it to be when we buy. As an owner of multiple practices, I know that it's not always as amazing as we think it might be, or as lucrative. It's a little bit of a challenge and a lot of time consuming, but that's another way to expand our income. And then you mentioned to me before the show, and I didn't know this, but you just bought a winery.
Yes.
That's incredible. So tell me about that.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit and say that dentistry is a really interesting industry in that it is a very profitable industry, and there's not many that have a 65% overhead where you can be so profitable. And so in that, you do have other income. And what you realize as so I've been practicing for 17, 18 years at this point, is that if something happens, then how are you going to have income if it can't be your own hands producing? And so just trying to think about those other opportunities. And my second year of building my own practice, I was super antsy and I loved fitness. And so I opened a fitness studio that had a cafe in it and a spa in it. And I had, I don't know, like 17 fitness instructors that I was responsible for, like putting schedules together. And then we had this cafe, and my parents were also helping out. So my mom would be in there like cooking in the cafe, and we had this lunch counter, and we had the spa part. And at one point, like I was the one that would open at 5 a.m. and then I'd be there till 11 p.m. And then and then I'd go practice dentistry. It was in my building, so I could walk next door, but the overhead percentage was so much higher. And so the profitability was at like 3%. And I'm thinking, why am I so exhausted from doing this business at 3% when I really have a profitable business that can make 45% over here, or 50%, or whatever you operate your practice at. So that was also a lot of soul searching and realizing like, I'm better just to sell that business and have a tenant who's paying me rent in my building than to keep doing. So I do think that every dentist should be looking at other income producing possibilities that don't just tie into your hands, because anything can happen. You can get a disability, you can, I don't know, I mean, whatever that is, you just can't predict the future. So I love dentistry. I still want to practice dentistry for as long as I can. But looking at other businesses, I would say winery is a little bit more of a passion than probably a business, but I am taking it very seriously. So my fiance, so Dr. Moody, and I bought it together, Justin Moody, and it's down in Napa. And the first thing everyone tells us is that we're crazy. And why would you buy it? Because Napa is where billionaires become millionaires or people go broke.
Right.
But both of us have a true love for business. And I mean, you could see the pages and pages of Excel spreadsheets where we try to take everything into account, and you have workflows of your vineyard managers and your winemakers, and it all just goes back to the flow of business and what to expect, and having projections. And we have stacks of books on wine and wineries and all of that. We're excited to have people come and collaborate. We'll have a kind of some CE opportunities there as well, but wine to us just brings people together, and it's where stories are told and ideas are brought up, and that's the love side of it. But we're definitely taking the business side seriously because we don't want to lose money at it either.
Yeah, how fun.
So, yeah,
Well, I
it's
love
fun.
that.
We're excited.
So you're not, this isn't a retirement plan for you.
I mean, it's a retirement plan, sort of. I mean, it will be an income producing, hopefully, retirement plan that we will enjoy, but it's not our only means to retire.
Right.
Dentistry is still probably the most profitable unless something crazy takes off. So.
And I've been right now coaching dentists that are overstressed, on the verge of burnout, and in their 50s, and they're wanting out. They're thinking about retirement, but don't know how to do it. They haven't made a plan. They're not ready. They're worried that I may have to practice until I die, or I don't know if I can sell my practice. I don't know how to transition. So I'm just helping them find that retirement lifestyle that they dream of, helping them so they can sell their practices at a top dollar amount and not have to work again. But all that being said, I don't think of retirement as not working. It's just a transition to a different lifestyle. And so whatever that looks like to you, which could involve dentistry, or maybe it doesn't, but if we're retiring because we're running away from something we're burned out on and think we're just going to stop and then sit at the couch, we're going to be in a rest home pretty soon. That won't last long. So I like your plan of, owning a business as a retirement plan means you're going to be working a long time. So I like that.
Hands in the dirt.
That's right. That's perfect. You might get out the tractor again.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of dentists. Oh, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I just said a bigger tractor than mine.
We have all sorts of different sizes there because you got to fit between rows of grapes. So some big ones, some little ones. I think dentists very much wrap their identity in dentistry, and I think that's one of the hardest things too, both in burnout and in retirement, because we are so close to people in proximity, and we get to know people so well. And you then take on all of that drama. And, you think like people are already scared to be there, and it's a really expensive healthcare modality that's not always covered by insurance or whatever. And it can get really draining. And it's so obvious to see all of that burnout. And it makes me so sad because part of the reason I volunteer is because it's easy to remember why I love dentistry when those barriers are taken away, the time's taken away, the money's taken away because they're getting that dentistry for free. And they're just there accepting that treatment. And you realize like, wow, I have a huge talent that I can do with my hands and serve people. But yeah, it's hard. It is hard when you burn out. And then you have that mental component of your identity wrapped up in being a dentist. And who are you going to be if you're not a dentist?
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot there. So the fact that you're doing the coaching, I think, is incredible because a lot of people need it. And to remember, and there's always ways to make money on your passions. So you just
That's right.
So
there
if you
is.
love fish, then go be a guide 1 or 2 days a week.
Let's make it work.
Experience, make some cash that way with whatever your passion is.
So what are you most excited about right now in dentistry? What do you see on the forefront? What's out there that kind of gets you jazzed?
I love digital dentistry. Like that's always been my thing. And one of the things that I've loved about it is, again, how to make it profitable and affordable for as many patients as we can. And I mean, I run a business, like I also want to make money in doing that. But I think one of the hot things right now is 3D printing. I'm so excited to see what we can accomplish at printing and these new materials that are coming out that are stronger. And like, can we look at things differently? Like, yes, a zirconia, I can hit it with a hammer, which is great, and it's not going to break. But does that serve me any good when I have an aging population or kids who are drinking high sugary drinks who get decay, or on medications where they have dry mouth and they get decay so much faster? Like, I don't need this crown to last 50 years material strength wise. I need something that I can repair and that I could cut through. And if I can print that for $7, do I need to charge my patient whatever? Because I know I can still be profitable, or can I still take that insurance to help them? I mean, there's so many just different things we can think about. And printing is what allows that. And printing, I mean, we're CEREC users, right? So
right. We're all about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have 2 prime scans and 4 mills and 4 ovens. Like, I've drank the Kool-Aid and I've spent the money on it. And so when you spend $180,000 on a CEREC machine and you spend $15,000 on a full printing machine, like, there's a big difference in your profitability.
Right.
And then the fact that you can return some of that to your patient, or you can make your business healthy and take care of your own practice as well, and the people who work there. There's no right or wrong in that. I just think printing right now is just exciting.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's so fun to talk. I get excited about dentistry when I talk to you. So it is contagious, and I can tell you love it. And I'm going to learn to pivot gracefully like you do when things aren't going well. Because for all of us, things don't go well some days. So if we can learn from that too, I think that's great.
Where does a coach go when you need coaching?
I have a coach.
I love that.
I think everybody should have a coach. I have a coach. I have a life coach that I meet with every week, and she specializes in goals and achieving goals, but we talk about everything. And I think it's fantastic. Yeah, I love it.
Good.
So if somebody wants to take a class or to follow you somehow, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Interested in classes, it's pathway.com or thepathway.com. And I'm on Instagram at Dr. Kris Aadland, or on Facebook. Or emails krisaadlanddmd@gmail.com. I'm a pretty open book. So yeah, hope everyone wants to ask questions, whether business or digital dentistry or whatever they want.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
This episode of the Better Dental Life podcast was brought to you by Better Dental Life. When you are ready to transform your life, transform your practice, and expand your income, become a member of Better Dental Life. You can find out more about us at betterdentallife.com. Make sure to search for the Better Dental Life podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, and click subscribe so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team here at Better Dental Life, thank you for listening.